God is not slow. He's intentional. Waiting seasons refine your trust, deepen your faith, and build the character needed to sustain what you're praying for. Hi, I'm Justin Buonomo, and this is Wisdom is Wealth. Wisdom is Wealth is designed to give you guys practical insights, modern strategies, and even timeless philosophies around gaining wisdom in your life. The wiser we get, the wealthier we will become. This podcast really is inspired by the book of Proverbs in the Bible, which was written by King Solomon, who prayed to God for wisdom and as a byproduct became the wealthiest person to ever live. If he was still alive today in present day, he'd be worth $1.3 trillion with a T. Not because he prayed for wealth, but he prayed to God to give him wisdom. And as he grew wiser, as a byproduct, he grew wealthier, particularly financially, but not just stopping there, in every facet of his life. And in my own life, I have realized that the wealthier I become, it's truthfully just because I have become wiser in life. I'm gonna bring on guests that are incredibly successful, incredibly amazing human beings, and have an amazing financial wealth that they've grown for themselves. And they're gonna share wisdom on their life experience in totality in hopes that something becomes valuable for you to implement in your process, in your life, and in your journey, and see how wisdom truthfully is wealth. Welcome back to another episode of Wisdom is Wealth. Today's topic and episode title is one of my favorite topics, and it's called How God Uses Money to Build Our Character. And I love talking about this, even though it's kind of painful to at least perhaps get this mirror held up to talk through this, to sit here and say like, oh, that's what God's doing. And then, it's not, a lot of this stuff isn't something that like you would sign up for particularly, but you're also grateful that God puts you through it, because the only way to the promised land, to the other side of the Jordan, like in Numbers 32, right? We make a bunch of excuses to stay on the east side of the Jordan, and when the promised land's on the other side of the Jordan, and what God has for us, that beautiful life that God has for us on the other side of the Jordan, right? The only way there is through our excuses, through this tension, through these hardships, and really understanding this and what God is doing with money to refine our character helps us get to the other side, helps us get to the other side of the Jordan and the promised land, and really just helps us stay faithful in the process because we understand where God is taking us, right? And so money is one of the most powerful tools God uses to shape us, not because money is spiritual in itself, but because it exposes what's happening in our hearts. And this is so true. Right? Jesus talked about money more than just about anything else in the Gospels. Not because he wanted people to be rich, and not because he hated money either, but because money reveals trust, priorities, fear, obedience, and patience faster than almost anything else in life. God does not use money to reward or punish us. He uses it to refine us. And so today I want to talk through 4 ways God uses money to build our character, deepen our faith, and mature us spiritually. So buckle up. All right. Number 1, I call it the test of trust. Money reveals what you really trust. When finances feel stable, it is easy to say you trust God. Trust me, I get this like no other. But when things get tight, when income slows, and when unexpected expenses show up, trust is definitely tested. Right? Do you rely on your plan or God's provision? Right? God often allows financial pressure not to punish us, but to prepare us. Pressure reveals foundations. If your peace disappears when money gets uncertain, then it's not condemnation. That's just good information. God uses financial tension to show us where our trust has drifted from him to systems, strategies, or savings accounts. And don't get me wrong, those things are needed. And don't get me wrong, money can give you a sense of peace or a sense of security, but it is not our source of peace and our source of security. Every time money gets tight or a little scary or something happens, we got a low month in business or my investments drop or whatever, right? It's often a great test for me. Have I fully learned to trust God, or am I still struggling with idolatry of money? And again, it's not condemnation, it's beautiful information. And don't get me wrong, planning is wise, stewardship is biblical, but trust must remain rooted in God. Money is a tool, God is the source. That's point number 1 of how God uses money to build our character, the test of trust. Number 2 is the lesson of contentment, right? Before God multiplies what is in your hand, he teaches you to be content with what is already there, right? With what you already have. I love the quote that says, gratitude's an ATM. Why? It's because it's literally almost impossible for us to attract a better future if we're not grateful for what we already have. And so Contentment is not complacency. These are two different things. I was actually just having this conversation with my wife a couple of weeks ago. Contentment is not complacency. Complacency is from the enemy, right? It is not good. Contentment is from God. And so it is peace without resentment, right? It is trusting that though what you have right now may not be ideal, it may not be the vision God has given you, you're still happy and content with what you have because you trust God. Because you trust God. And so if you cannot find peace with little, you will not find peace with more. That's kind of the point here, right? More money does not heal discontentment, and magnifies it. And I know this more than anybody. Ask me how I know. I know this more than anybody because I've struggled with this for years and still do from time to time. That's what I was saying before. Like, this isn't condemnation. This is information. This is like actually an opportunity for like, oh, whoa, like this is really happening. This is good understanding, right? And now I can actually do better because I'm aware. And so God often withholds increase until contentment is formed, because increase without peace becomes a burden, not a blessing. Contentment teaches gratitude, it teaches humility, and it teaches joy independent of circumstances. Like I said in the beginning of this, some of this stuff is not what you want to sign up for, right? But you're grateful for it, right? Because it's one of the main ways, if not the only way, especially when it comes to money, for God to teach us gratitude, to teach us humility, and to teach us joy that's independent of circumstances. This is how you live a sustainable life, right? If your joy is dependent on your circumstances, and I get the ick just thinking about it because I've been so guilty of it over the years, and it makes me sick. I lose sleep over it. I definitely have gotten some gray hairs over it. I've lost a ton of, value in relationships from it because I'm just never present. Right? I can only imagine what it's done to my marriage and my parenting, my business, right? If your joy is dependent on circumstances, it is not a sustainable way to live. And so this is why Scripture links contentment to strength, not lack. God is not opposed to growth. He is opposed to growth that outpaces your character. All right, so number 2, a lesson of contentment. Right? Number 3, the refinement of obedience. Sometimes God will ask you to give when it does not make sense. Not because he needs your money, but because he is shaping your heart. We don't give and or act in obedience to what God's calling us to do with our money because God needs our money. Right? It's because God needs our heart. And this is a beautiful way for us to be able to hand our heart over and keep it over. And so financial obedience is one of the clearest ways God trains us to trust his voice over our feelings. And giving exposes control. Giving exposes fear. Giving exposes whether money is a tool or a master. God uses obedience and finances to teach us surrender, not blind surrender, but relational trust. And I feel like a lot of people hear the generosity and giving side of stuff and they confuse that with people pleasing. They confuse that with avoiding friction, right? I give you an example, right? You can't just give to people please. Our motives matter. Just like you can't just give so God blesses you in return. You can't just treat God like a vending machine. You can't just give, right, in hopes that, God will give you something in return. Same thing when it comes, you can't just give to people please. You can't just give to avoid conflict, right? Like if somebody comes to you for money and you know that they're not a good source of giving them money, you know that they're probably not going to pay you back. You know that it's probably going to cause friction and issues. You know they're not going to be a good steward of the money that you're giving them, right? Giving so you please them, or giving so you don't have to handle friction, which is just like, hey, Justin, I love you very much. You know that, but I'm not giving you this money because I don't think that you're going to handle it well. That could possibly cause an issue. That could cause an argument, especially depending on who it is, right? Family, friends. And so giving to people please and giving, to avoid friction and wrapping a spiritual bow on it and calling generosity is not biblical either. And so that's not blind surrender, but relational trust. When God speaks and you respond, even when it's uncomfortable, your spiritual muscles grow stronger. It's so true, right? Obedience is not about outcomes. It's about alignment. And alignment always produces peace, even when the math feels uncomfortable. All right, so that's point number 3, the refinement of obedience, right? And then last one here, the number 4, the patience process. The P word that I struggle with, and I've always struggled with in so many different capacities, patience, right? I've heard this quote before it says, we serve a crockpot God with a microwave mindset. Like, we want everything now, right? Like, I remember when I was at Hopkins, I was like 23, 24 years old. I shouldn't have been in the position in the first place. I was only there for a year, and I literally was upset that I wasn't the CEO yet. It's like, you gotta be patient with things. And don't get me wrong, there's some good things that could come from that, right? But ultimately, money teaches patience like a few other things. Like, money teaches patience like no other thing, I would say, right? You plant seeds of discipline long before you see a harvest. Ed Milet, one of my favorite podcasts out there, always says the reality we're living in is usually just a direct reflection or result of our actions 90 days ago. And I think that's even aggressive, like meaning 90 days, like probably 6 months ago, 7 months ago. In God's kingdom, it could be years. Noah literally built an ark 100 years before the flood came. Talk about serious foresight and obedience and patience, right? He looked like an idiot for 100 years. We're like, what are you building this ship for? Right? Imagine just getting asked that for 100 years because God told me to do so. There's a flood coming. Probably 50 years passes, like, hey buddy, where's that flood you're talking about, right? It's like he planted seeds of discipline long before he saw the harvest. Right? And so you save before it feels exciting when it comes to money. You invest before results show up, and you budget before freedom becomes visible. And so, especially with investing, like when I started investing years ago, it was really hard because I wasn't seeing immediate results. Now I've been investing for about 10 years now, and I'm like, whew, I get why you got to be patient. And I'm starting to see the results of that patience, of that trust, of that obedience. And so God uses this process of money to build self-control, endurance, in faith, especially if we go about it the right way. And so waiting, I promise you, it's not wasted time, it's formative time. Every season of delayed gratification strengthens character. Every disciplined decision builds trust in God's timing. Money reminds us that harvests do not arrive immediately, but they always arrive in season. God is not slow, he's intentional. And what I'm going to leave you with is waiting seasons refine your trust, deepen your faith, and build the character needed to sustain what you're praying for. And so to wrap this episode up, this is a quick, easy one, and I wanted it to be that way because though this is quick and easy, sometimes more isn't more. This is powerful, these 4 points. This is truthfully what God does with money, how he develops our character. And so the more that we develop our character, the more opportunities we're matched with. God matches our opportunities in life to our character and what our character is ready for. And so God does not use money to define your worth. He uses it to shape your character. And money reveals trust. It teaches contentment, it refines obedience, and it builds patience. If you view money only as a reward, you're going to miss the formation. You're going to miss the whole point, right? But if you see it as a tool God uses to mature you, every season becomes meaningful. That's so important. Wisdom is not just what you earn, it's who you become along the way. And that is how God uses money to build character that lasts. And so one of God's biggest goals is our sanctification journey, right? Which is just making us more like Jesus. It's making our character more aligned and reflective of Jesus's character. And God often uses money it's not the only thing he uses, but he often uses money as one of the tools to help accomplish that goal. And here's the 4 reasons and the 4 ways he does that. And so I hope this episode was helpful. Run it back again to hear it. Take notes on these 4. Share it with 4 people, actually. Let's match it. Share it with 4 people that you think would benefit from this episode. And whatever platform you're on, like, subscribe, share, download, comment, just show some love here, right? We're trying to grow this podcast and grow my platform so I can continue to use the wisdom that God has given me, right? God told me months ago, teach what I've shown you, right? And I think that there's just out there in the faith-based space, we are so misled and it's so misconstrued what he actually says about money. And I hope that my content continues to free all of us from the lies that we walk in around money as believers, that God hates money, doesn't want us to be wealthy, money's bad. Like, all that's a lie. All that's from the enemy. All that keeps us in financial bondage. And you'll never understand God's will for your heart or will for your life if you don't understand his heart. And so through these teaching, through these episodes, I hope to show you and the people in your circle that you share this with and the engagement that you give to help us grow this podcast organically so these platforms push it out to more people. I hope to reveal God's heart so we can all walk in the will that he has for our life. I love y'all. See you in the next episode of Wisdom is Wealth.